whole worst to best concept needs a criterion at the best of times, let alone when you're talking about a prize that has for the last 60 plus years now been classed by many as the richest and most prestigious in all of North American pro wrestling. But the factors for ranking here are actually, well, they're pretty straightforward. Drawing power, quality of work, cumulative tenure, influence, and whether they rocked or sucked, really. So with all that said, I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and it's time to look through many a decade and rank every single WWE champion ever from worst to best. Number 54, Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon did far worse things with his absolute power than crowning himself WWE champion, but it was unquestionably the lowest ebb for the company's top title when looking back, and realistically a low ebb for the McMahon character during the company's turn of the century boom. Now, to be absolutely fair to the move, it was absolutely huge in context. The babyface McMahon had been a rival heel Triple H desperately needed to increase his credibility during a wonky 1999 rise, and the pair ended up drawing massive ratings for this whole SmackDown fiasco and all the fallout that went down on Raw just a few days after. But strapping up the chairman was simply a step too far in the end, as proven by the creative dead end the whole thing just caused. McMahon won the gold on a Thursday, surrendered it on a Monday, then cooched his non-defense of it as an honourable move, and then the gold was just back with Triple H by virtue of the six-pack challenge nonsense that was designed just to clear the whole dumb mess up. A poor bit of business that everyone just tried to forget about in the end. Number 53, Rey Mysterio. Moving from the silly to the absolutely sublime, there's probably no bigger gap of least to most deserving WWE champion than the one between Rey Mysterio and Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Not only did McMahon manage to hold the belt longer than Ray did, he also managed to get away without losing it. I mean, Ray couldn't even make it through the broadcast where he won the damn thing, the poor guy. On a July 25th, 2011 Raw, which pretty much revealed there and then just how terrible this whole Summer of Punk angle was going to be, a tournament set up to crown the new paper WWE champion eventually concluded with Rey Mysterio winning the whole damn thing. This actually marked his first ever WWE championship win, and was at least a flash of feel-good from a company theoretically in disarray when their actual champion had gone walkabouts. Mysterio was effectively guilted into putting up the strap against John Cena on the very same show later on in the night though, just to get a visual of Cena and Punk both holding WWE championships staring at each other 8 days after it looked like Punk had left WWE for good. All of it was just a bit deflating, to be honest, and it was so infuriating at the time seeing Rey Mysterio's first ever WWE championship reign just get thrown away, just wasted in one night. Number 52, Stan Stasiak. To understand Stan Stasiak as WWE champion is to understand the simplicity of how business was conducted during a very different era for the world of pro wrestling. Holding the belt for just 9 days, he was the lucky heel chosen to transition the belt between babyface heroes Pedro Morales and Bruno Sammartino. Because at that time, the good guys did not beat each other or even challenge each other for the belts. That's just not what they did then. Interestingly, though the booking had dictated that it was indeed Bruno's time again, they were at least mindful enough to protect Morales as his 3-year reign came to an end. The pair fell backwards in a full Nelson and Stasiak just so happened to roll his shoulder at 2. Fans in the building that night were left either confused or to assume that Pedro has somehow found a way to actually retain that night, ostensibly to stop a riot breaking out as a result of the finish. Stan the Man went on to describe his time with the title as the happiest 9 days of his life. Which is just a sweet and generally nice thing to note, really, isn't it? Number 51, Ivan Koloff. Probably the best example of what a transitional champion was used for when the phrase actually had meaning. Ivan Koloff silenced the world when he finally ended Bruno Sammartino's near 8-year reign as champion in 1971. Yes, you heard me correctly, 8 years. Any heel to accomplish that would have rightly been the hottest on the planet, right? And that's exactly what the Russian Bear was until Pedro Morales righted that wrong just 21 days later. 3 weeks after riots nearly broke out around Madison Square Garden, everything was once again right with the world, as Vince McMahon Sr. had found his next babyface hope. Now, Koloff did actually hang around the top of the card for a little while longer after that, but by then his purpose had been well and truly served. He did his job for the business. Number 50, Kane. With only one day to his name as WWE Champion as opposed to his many other days as World Heavyweight Champion later down the line, Kane wasn't trusted with the industry's top prize for very long at all. But as far as 24-hour stints go, well, his was definitely the best of the lot. The Big Red Machine popped a pay-per-view number for being willing to set himself on fire if he lost to Stone Cold Steve Austin at King of the Ring 1998. Then scored a huge television rating for a Monday Night Raw rematch with the Rattlesnake the next night. The Big Red Draw, more like. Effective as a needle mover because of how over and threatening he still was in the wake of that introductory program with his sibling. This fleeting reign also helped to kickstart another chapter in that Undertaker saga. It was at this point that the Brothers of Destruction were being teased as reuniting on the sly, all in an effort to win the gold that was so hurriedly ripped away from Kane's grasps. He set fire to ring posts for the next 2 decades following this story's peak, but he was never as hot as this moment in the sun. Number 49, Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant might have only held the beloved Winged Eagle for a matter of moments, but more eyes saw him hand that belt over to Ted DiBiase as planned than any other WWE title match before or since. Hell of a flex. 33 million viewers for an impossible-looking rating of 15.2 tuned in to the special February 5th, 1998 edition of the Main Event. All to see the WrestleMania 3 rematch end in creatively controversial fashion, as Hulk Hogan's 4-year WWE Championship reign came to a screeching halt. Unlike in the opening moments of their iconic first match, there was absolutely no doubt over the validity of the 3 count. Hogan's shoulder was up. Yet the referee continued to count, and Ted DiBiase's evil plan fully paid off. Fans at least knew that the fix was in before the broadcast had concluded. And days later, Jack Tunney ruled that despite being given the belt, Ted DiBiase was not your champion. But neither was the Hulkster. Oh, the drama. WrestleMania 4 was to host a tournament for all the marbles, ensuring that Andre's enormous draw of a cup of coffee deservedly entered the record books. Number 48, Alberto Del Rio. Name a white-hot Alberto Del Rio WWE singles match right now. Go on, try. Nope, you can't because one never happened, did it? This is the worst! And though not every single wrestler can put on these kind of matches, one who is so regularly involved in the championship conversation and contention and all that kind of stuff should definitely be held to that kind of standard, right? The hottest it ever got for Alberto Del Rio and the WWE Championship was during his perplexing involvement in the whole Summer of Punk stuff. And even then he was just one of the many to claim a victory over the voice of the voiceless that felt unearned and unwanted, both with a capital U. A talent ostensibly worth experimenting on in that position, Del Rio was in and out of top spots for years really in the aftermath. But at best he was never really more than a silver medal main eventer. Number 47, Jinder Mahal. 5 years after Jinder Mahal's bizarre and mostly abysmal WWE Championship run, there was a weird move to try and reframe the whole thing as a bit of a noble failure. Not a completely inelegant and brainless one, which it was. Having Mahal conquer Randy Orton for the WWE Championship at Backlash 2017 in a bad match was a generationally shocking call in every sense. Hell, most rational viewers felt that a belt theft angle a few weeks before had just been booked to capture the mad visual of the modern-day Maharaja holding the illustrious prize. Instead, it actually just foreshadowed a slump of a summer, where defenses against Randy Orton and Shinsuke Nakamura seriously clogged up pay-per-view and television time, all as WWE tried and failed to make greater inroads into the Indian market. If there was a single metric upon which the title reign could have been deemed a success, it would have been on the strength of the gates for Mahal working the shows on top as the heroic talisman. Ultimately though, an Indian tour with a stadium show just became a single house show, in which Mahal, by then not even WWE champion, lost to Triple H in a piece of trivia that nobody is ever curious to learn about. Number 46, Batista. A game changer as World Heavyweight Champion, Batista's runs with the WWE Championships were, well, they were only really transitional, so it's not really going to be possible to rank him much higher than where he is on this list. He had to vacate his first due to injury, and his second, while often hilarious, was informed by a heel turn just used to set up a dream match with John Cena at WrestleMania 26. which he lost. He then went on to lose the feud as a way of easing himself into retirement from wrestling full-time. Notably, Big Dave's time with the title came when the belt, in every single respect, was tied to Cena more than just about anybody else. The WWE logo may have been firmly attached to the center of the title by then, but it was still called the spinner strap. The customization so linked to Big Match John's first run with it, and anyone other than Cena holding it just usually looked all kinds of daft, including Dave. But we still love you, mate, we love you. Number 45, Dean Ambrose. In All Elite Wrestling, Jon Moxley became the ace of the Challenger brand's pro wrestling universe. And Dean Ambrose could have offered all of his evident talents to WWE once upon a time, but a creative team that never really understood the man behind the post-Shield madness was as doomed to failure as the 2016 title run itself. Given the keys to SmackDown Live as the brand was finally saved from Raw rerun hell in 2016, Ambrose just couldn't shake the silly stigmas that had been attached to his goofy persona in the days post-Shield split. His title defenses never felt like as big of a priority as whatever John Cena or AJ Styles were doing on Tuesday nights, and never was this more apparent than when he was dragged into their world. Rapidly dropping the belt to the Phenomenal One, he was then saddled with James Ellsworth, in a clear sign that it was back to the top of the upper mid-card for more exhausting comedy. Yay, what a waste, man. Number 44, Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam's WWE Championship reign came 5 years too late, and was at least 5 months too short. Mr. Monday Night had been coined as a nickname during the height of ECW's pretend turf war with WWE in 1997. Used to rile up the Philadelphia natives and put heat on Van Dam's team with Sabu. That bit worked because the market leader could have snapped him up really at any time. By the time they did in 2001, the waters were so infested by sharks, his push, well, it stalled. And ultimately, he was normalized as a mid-card guy just unable to smash through the glass ceiling, despite being physically able to break through it via his insane vertical leap. Consequently, his 2006 ECW One Night Stand victory over John Cena was, well, it was more about the moment than the crowning. He might have had the interest in a proper run, but we were never really given the chance to find out. After being stopped by the police and caught possessing illegal substances, he was, well, subsequently jobbed out and never got near the title again. Number 43, Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt was a one-man merchandise machine, to such an extent that by the time he became Universal Champion as The Fiend in 2019, fans were willing to drop 4 figures on a custom title belt with his spooky face slapped on it. I mean, I did consider it. It was at least some reward for what he'd endured in the years prior, with his one and only WWE Championship run just being another reminder of how often his and the company's visions weren't really synced up. To much fanfare, Wyatt finally became WWE Champion at Elimination Chamber 2017. It ensured he'd head into WrestleMania holding the company's top prize over his shoulder, and came as a result of a shockingly well-received program with Randy Orton too. The rise had been so organically impressive that few could have really predicted just how badly things would turn out at the show of shows. Wyatt was booked to manifest projections of insects onto the canvas as a way of, well, spooking Randy Orton. But the whole thing was just, well, painfully stupid, wasn't it? It was awful. It was bad. The Apex Predator brushed the nonsense aside, RKO'd Wyatt, and pinned him in like 10 minutes. And sadly, the late great Wyatt would never get near the title again. Number 42, The Miz. Because The Miz is, well, The Miz, it's easy to look down on his reigns as WWE Champion as a bit of a joke. But when he won Money in the Bank back in 2010, many actually forget that he was, at that point, the best person that could have held that case. He spoke his success into existence during a United States Championship run that was pretty well received, to be honest, but suffered the fate of being the third man in a 2-man program between The Rock and John Cena heading into WrestleMania 27. Even though The Rock wasn't wrestling at WrestleMania 27, it was all just a bit of a mess. History repeated itself a decade later when the A-lister won the Money in the Bank briefcase off Otis and then later cashed it in on Drew McIntyre. I still can't believe they did Otis like that. It's just not fair. Miz accepted help from Bobby Lashley in exchange for the Almighty to get a shot, to then set up his own Show of Shows match with Drew McIntyre, and The Miz was subsequently squashed by Lashley because of course he was. It was a bit of a thank you gesture of a run more than anything else, wasn't it? But it was yet again a case of The Miz being perhaps the greatest ever middling utility player that the company will have ever had. So that's something. Number 41, Chris Jericho. What a complex relationship Chris Jericho has had with the WWE Championship. Most will know that this picture right here comes from just moments before the actual win, the title win, was stripped away from the records by Triple H after Earl Hebner had done a bit of a fast count during their match. And when he actually got it for real 18 months later, he learned about that fact from Vince McMahon and The Undertaker, joking about how useless he would be. Wrestling, eh? Jericho wasn't really given too many opportunities to prove them wrong either. And when he lost it again to Triple H at WrestleMania X8 in a main event that simply could not follow the special attraction that was The Rock vs Hulk Hogan that night, few really clamoured for him to get to the very top of the mountain again. And technically he never did. By the time Y2J became a bona fide main eventer in the company a few years later, he was dropping that nickname altogether and carrying around the World Heavyweight Championship instead. With titles and belts split apart at that point, he was just too deep in the quest to hold on to the big gold belt to go and win another WWE one. Number 40, Psycho Sid. Harnessing the one thing he always had over absolutely every other person he worked with and every other person on planet Earth, Psycho Sid overflowed with aura when he returned to WWE in 1996 as top babyface under champion Shawn Michaels. His uneasy relationship with the concept of sanity was perfect when he joined HBK to take on the likes of Vader, Davey Boy Smith and Owen Hart. But all it took was one tweak of the persona and eyelid and he was dethroning Shawn Michaels in particularly cruel fashion, in front of a Madison Square Garden crowd completely in love with the chaos he wrought. The pattern repeated at Bret Hart's expense when Sid reclaimed the title the following February. But in the case of both reigns, the vociferous reactions in the buildings did not result in the kind of box office changes that the company were desperately looking for. Whether it was because his work was just too see-through or his character was too one-dimensional, fans crucially only bought the character right up until the point where they were asked to pay for him. There have been worse men chosen to stabilize things during unstable times, of course, but with Big Sid in general, the limitations always ended up overwhelming the short-term gains. Number 39, Big E. 2021 WWE was the last full calendar year where Vince McMahon was very much still completely in control of the company's creative direction. Ergo, not a particularly nice place, not a place that made sense, and not a place where anything remotely good was ever guaranteed. Put simply, it was a rough old time, wasn't it? Big E, WWE Champion, was the earnestly magic rule-proving exception though. A wonderful person reaching the very pinnacle of his career, and sharing that moment with their best buds and the fans that genuinely love them with all their hearts. Strip away the critical analysis and it's as simplistically brilliant as the wrestling business can get. And the feeling was too, until a few weeks into the run when it became painfully clear that the company hadn't really thought about anything else after the cash-in moment. They'd gone, yeah, big cash-in, and then now what? A Survivor Series champion versus champion match pretty much summed up the malaise. A well-established Roman Reigns completely ate up E in a poor match that played out in front of indifference. The Tribal Chief was the top guy, whereas Big E wasn't really presented as somebody who could possibly replace him at some point. And there's a real injustice to E possibly never being able to lock up again in the wake of a really serious neck injury that he suffered in 2022. Not that anybody wants him to take a risk with his health, but he swam through rivers of manure to live his best life as one of the 2010's real shining lights. And life in WWE's new era would be the smoother ride that he'd always deserved. We send in all the love, E. Get well soon, man. Number 38, Buddy Rogers. If he can't be the best, be the first. And that's realistically how time and history will reflect Buddy Rogers' time as the WWE Champion. Rogers was the man at the centre of Vince McMahon Sr. and Toots Mondt withdrawing their interest from the National Wrestling Alliance in 1963. They then formed the Worldwide Wrestling Federation with the Nature Boy on top. He'd held the NWA World Heavyweight Championship before losing it to Lou Thesz. But the pair of promoters refused to acknowledge that switch and brought him into their promotion as the new Talisman. In the spirit of nonsense pro wrestling lore, it was announced that he'd actually won the title during an April 1963 tournament in Rio de Janeiro. And even that was just to legitimize it in order for it to actually mean something when he dropped the title to Bruno Sammartino the very next month. Wrestling, eh? What a balmy world. Number 37, Yokozuna. Yokozuna was an absolutely terrific wrestler for a man his size. So much so that his work is actually aging far better than many from that era. The pace at which he throws his gargantuan frame around is a sight to behold. And though the xenophobic character that he played was pretty low-hanging fruit as far as heel heat goes, He was dominant enough in his matches to sell the threat of holding onto the WWE Championship, well, forever. Unfortunately for Yoko though, he's just one of many WWE champions let down by the numbers. The time wasn't exactly a commercially fertile one for the company, and the sumo star was one of many failed attempts to turn the corner doing what had worked in the past. Not to be reductive either, but Zuna's size was particularly important at the time too. As the company hurriedly tried to eliminate artificially inflated physiques, they relied more on natural ones. Big suddenly wasn't rooted in height or bicep measurements, brother, but just how much you could tip the scales at and if sitting on an opponent could be a believable match ender. Loads and yeah, were the answers provided by Mr. Fuji's final boss champion. At least until he was shunted down the card following the end of his second reign in 1994. Number 36, Sheamus. Sheamus will probably go down in history as one of the most underappreciated wrestlers of his time. Not least because there are multiple occasions where as WWE champion he felt either completely out of place or just completely ill-suited to the role. The decision to gamble on him in 2009, just months after his debut, was uncharacteristically bold for WWE, but by the time he scored the goal for a second time several months later, he'd become the least interesting element of an ongoing war being waged on WWE by the Nexus. 5 years later, and he was once again a wrestler near a top spot rather than really in one, if you get what I'm saying. Chosen as the Bastard of the Week to cash in on Roman Reigns moments after he'd won his first WWE Championship at Survivor Series 2015, the Celtic Warrior was deemed a strong enough heel to finally get the fans to really rally behind Roman Reigns after a number of, well, failed attempts. And what do you know, this didn't work either, did it? And a deeply underappreciated wrestler once again felt like a mid-carder done good, rather than a worthy contender finally getting his moment. In short, Shamey deserved better, man. Number 35, The Big Show. Drafted into the Survivor Series 1999 main event as a substitute for Stone Cold Steve Austin, after the company had falsely advertised a long-awaited triple threat between him, Triple H and The Rock, The Big Show won, and then soaked the belt with tears and spit to really sell the storyline death of his father that had been going down in a storyline with him and Big Boss Man. Unfairly placed into the position of unsuitable replacement, he was doomed really from day one, and was effortlessly deposed by Triple H less than 2 months later. Just under 3 years later, his second run lasted even less time, and it came with its own weird, unique responsibility because he had to try and babyface Brock Lesnar. After the Beast rampaged his way to the WWE Championship just 5 months after his main roster debut, the company operative was crystal clear. The next big thing was to complete his ascent as a good guy at WrestleMania, which meant he had to lose the belt and the services of Paul Heyman before he got there. Enter Big Show, who worked the role as somebody more monstrous than the company's new monster. He beat Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series 2002, shocking the Madison Square Garden crowd, ahead of passing it on to Kurt Angle in December to slot that piece of the WrestleMania puzzle into place. Show always should have been far more than an omni-turning utility man, but he still did the best he could with what he was given. Number 34, Sergeant Slaughter. WWE will forever claim that Sergeant Slaughter had so much heat on him that WrestleMania that year had to move from the mammoth outdoor LA Coliseum to the substantially smaller LA Sports Arena next door, even though they experienced zero issues with punters no longer being able to attend the show. How strange. The reality was different to their insecure fiction, of course, and the returning star playing an Iraqi sympathizer for cheap heat during the Gulf War simply just wasn't that interesting an opponent for Hulk Hogan. Despite the deranged build and Slaughter generating fury from Ultimate Warrior fans after their Royal Rumble clash. Short, not particularly profitable, and controversial to a regrettable extent. All of these are familiar traits for WWE when they are booking to shock. But this strategy almost never ends up putting the booking on the right side of history. This reign right here, folks, was no different. Number 33, Kofi Kingston. Kofi Kingston's lone WWE Championship run is remembered for its beginning and its end, and how it reflected WWE's very best and very worst. The former was just about as good as it could get in WWE back in 2019. A glorious WrestleMania outing against Daniel Bryan on a night that felt just about impossible until it was actually done. Kofi had slid into that spot almost by accident earlier that year, and the booking did nothing to ease the worries that the company would back him right up until the finish line and then bottle it on the grandest stage. History was made, tears were shed, and absolutely all of it was perfect. I loved it. The latter, though, found him needlessly and thoughtlessly squashed by Brock Lesnar in a pathetically grim piece of booking devoid of any human emotion. Hateful and pointless, just like the stupid old man holding the pencil. The run was for all the good of the crowning and should definitely be celebrated as such. But the only way from there was down, outside of a decent rebooted Randy Orton feud. Oh, and speaking of which, number 32, Randy Orton. Randy Orton is, as of recording, a 10-time WWE champion. This is a remarkable achievement in its own right and more than earns him this particular spot on the list. But can you name 10 great Randy Orton matches from any of those reigns? No, soz Randy. Now those that have shared the ring with Orton could probably name you 100, but it is understandable that performers would want to preserve their bump card for the loudest possible reactions. You know, rather than worrying all that much about fans actually caring about the matches decades later. As a heel and babyface, the Apex Predator was a safe pair of hands and a star willing to do the job. And there's a lot to be said of that, even if it does remove much of the chat from the actual quality of the reigns. Living through the title reigns though, none of which made any measurable difference to the company financially, rarely felt transcendent. Number 31, Bobby Lashley. The less said about Bobby Lashley's second WWE Championship reign, the better. Having won it from Brock Lesnar entirely due to Roman Reigns' interference, then celebrating like an all-conquering babyface anyway, he then dropped it back to Lesnar just a month later so Lesnar and Reigns could just continue their tepid rivalry. It was just a big waste of time. It was an undignified sequel to a long-awaited maiden run in 2021, some 14 years after the company had first raced to crown him. Injury in 2007 derailed a monster push, and then relations between the two sides soured in 2008. And this was long before he'd ever reached his full potential as a wrestler. After a bit of a ropey start in 2019, he was back alongside his former Impact and TNA partner MVP, and back in the catbird seat. Crushing The Miz after helping him cash in on Drew McIntyre in the first place, Lashley was given the ultimate vote of confidence by management when he actually defeated the Scottish Warrior in the opener at WrestleMania 37. The wait went on for Drew when it came to getting his hands back on a World Championship, and then Bobby held the belt through the final months of the Thunderdome era before suffering karmic retribution via Big E's own Money in the Bank cash-in. Number 30, John Bradshaw Layfield. I was fuming when JBL won the WWE title, man. I was heartbroken. Not only had the former APA man beat Eddie Bloody Guerrero, but he'd done it mere weeks after being separated from Farouk and rebadged as a heel. And in a Texas bull rope match that played out in front of pretty much silence in the middle of a rather wretched Great American Bash pay-per-view. And by virtue of Guerrero bundling him into the fourth corner and losing without realizing. It was commitment to the bit at least to give him the title and luxuriate in that bizarre visual of a perennial drab tag team wrestler being WWE champion. But it was an equal buy-in from Bradshaw, who actually managed to get the project over in buildings. 279 days later, he used all that heat that he built up to put John Cena over at WrestleMania 21. Ending as it started though, the match itself was just not very good because JBL just wasn't really that good of a singles wrestler. The champ was at long last here, but it would take further bludgeoning of the JBL character in their rematch to truly anoint him. Number 29, Seth Rollins. A man who's benefited as much from Money in the Bank as much as he's suffered its brutal consequences. Seth Rollins completing the heist of the century was truly, well, one of the greatest WrestleMania moments of all time. Injury abbreviated his first WWE title reign later that year, but it had gone well enough that he was actually given a hero's return when he made his comeback in 2016. Unfortunately, like a long second run, that just wasn't on the cards. He cut an each and every one of you missive the next night, and then he'd actually pin Roman Reigns to become a two-time WWE champion the next month. But then lost it almost immediately to third Shield member Dean Ambrose because he just popped up and he cashed in, didn't he? Rollins' quest to be the guy in WWE has pretty much been the story of his entire singles run. But when it comes to the WWE Championship itself, well, that's actually evaded him ever since. Now, Universal and World Heavyweight Championship titles weren't exactly second place prizes, were they? But only the gold coating disguised that they were typically silver medals. Number 28, Cody Rhodes.
Finish the story.
At time of recording, Cody Rhodes has only just recently finally finished his story and began walking down the one pro wrestling path that his father never walked. But WWE business surged enough on the journey to suggest that the destination will probably continue the boom. Now, Rhodes' real story is one of the most remarkable in American professional wrestling history, with the fruits of his labor spread far and wide across the entire scene. And of all the wrestlers to get the WrestleMania 40 curtain call, we can all agree that the American Nightmare was one of the most deserving. His gamble of a lifetime to leave AEW was then topped by WWE's own one to hold off on his title win for a whole damn year. And in that time, Rhodes and the business only got hotter. I don't know how. Such was the desire to see him through to his rightful place at the very top of the card. The current champion deserves all of this more than most, and long may the good times keep on coming. Thank you very much for watching this particular video today, folks, and if you are enjoying what you're watching right now, then go down below, hit the subscribe button, and you'll get more What Culture Wrestling stuff on your screen. I know, what a world. Number 27, Jeff Hardy. WWE should have crowned Jeff Hardy as champion at the 2008 Royal Rumble when he was the most over babyface in the entire company. Numbers were up, buzz was high, and between the impending moves over to HD and PG, change was in the air anyway. Hardy was the one people were willing to pay to see, so they should have just strapped him up. Or should they? Just a month after a deflating RKO trampled all over the Dream, Hardy failed a wellness test which took him out of WrestleMania altogether, delaying any further gratification until December when he finally reached the top of that mountain, and he didn't do a swanton off it, so there. 2009 looked like it'd go the same way when his first run ended at the Royal Rumble, but it all came good again at long last ahead of his autumn exit from the company. A scintillating program with CM Punk resulted in the straight-edge superstar turning heel for the very first time in the company, unleashing a slew of matches and promo exchanges that were just better than absolutely anything else that was going down on WWE TV at that point in time. And by the time he was gone, personal issues notwithstanding, he was significantly missed. Number 26, Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero himself later admitted that he wasn't quite up to the standard he'd set himself as WWE champion during his first and only reign at the top of the mountain. But much of that might have been the ridiculous amount of pressure that Latino heat put on himself as a man with wrestling in his blood. The biggest breakout star of his illustrious family, Eddie became undeniable as WWE's next top babyface in late 2003. And his dethroning of Brock Lesnar at No Way Out 2004 remains one of the most moving coronations of a champion ever. And for me, it is my favourite match of all time. I just love that thing. It obviously took on greater reverence in the years that followed when he passed away. Even his mass bloodletting during his program with JBL, one designed to get the new heel title holder as over as possible, carries an uneasy tone when watched with the vast shadow his death left behind. The whole run is as much about the tragedy as it is the triumph. Not only did Eddie not realise just how worthy he was of the spot, but he passed away far too soon to get more quality time with the title. Number 25, Ric Flair. Ric Flair's legendary 1992 Royal Rumble victory was one of the most impressive crownings of anybody in company history.
And it's the Ninja Boy!
You know, to anybody who was still trying to figure out who exactly this person was who was threatening to take Hulk Hogan out.
Wings!
Crazy as it may seem through a modern lens, for all that Hogan Flair was the interpromotional dream match during the 1980s, there were still plenty of WWE hardcores who didn't really know too much about Slick Rick, but they did after the Rumble. And by the mere fact that he was given the gold upon arrival, most people could pretty much come to the realization that, yeah, this guy must be the real deal. Taking the title into WrestleMania and then picking it back up again shortly after SummerSlam, Flair's reigns weren't exactly long. But he was absolutely the right guy to put in the mix during a challenging time. Both promotion and performer have spoken politely, but with an air of mild disappointment about the 1991 to 1993 run. But time has been way kinder than they ever were. The matches, they hold up, Flair looks magnificent with the belt, and title losses to Randy Savage and Bret Hart were hugely beneficial for those new champions. Good business. Woo! Number 24, Diesel. Objectively, the lowest drawing WWE champion of all time. Sorry, Kev. Big Nash always made a point of defending the honor of Diesel's run based on just how poorly it was booked most of the time. After failing to win his first pay-per-view match against Bret Hart at the 1995 Royal Rumble, he was then ran ragged by Shawn Michaels in a contest structured around him turning babyface one night later. Then he failed to conclusively beat the likes of Sid and Davey Boy Smith in total stinkers. And this was all thanks to roster depth problems and financials being stretched so thin that the water coolers were taken out of Titan Towers. Aside from all that, everything that had gotten Big Daddy Cool so over in the first place was packed. Just so Nash could awkwardly morph into the typical smiling sub-Hulk Hogan persona Vince McMahon still believed made a top guy. Yeah, it didn't. And not so coincidentally, when he dropped the belt to Bret Hart after holding it for a year, he became the first true tweener and was the most convincing he'd ever been in the role. So much so that he got a mega deal with WCW instead of another shot with the gold. Too sweet indeed. Number 23, Drew McIntyre. The WWE Championship has simultaneously evaded and defined Drew McIntyre's entire career in a way that's almost entirely unique to the man himself. A quest for the richest prize drove him to make it to the company in the first place, but a realization of just how far he had fallen away from it by 2014 resulted in a complete career overhaul before his return in 2017. Achieving his destiny in 2020 was notoriously bittersweet thanks to the pandemic he oversaw, of course. But never forget, he oversaw it bloody well, adopting the enforced game show host patter without ever compromising his character's values. The babyface Drew McIntyre was a good egg on the microphone who fought hard when it came to doing the hard part of the job, considering he typically had an audience of absolutely zero to do it all in front of, and was forced to complete his first defense of the belt just like minutes after he'd won the thing during that weird taped WrestleMania. Hell, it's little wonder his heel turn was so effective and loaded with long simmering ammunition. Number 22, The Undertaker. The Undertaker's best time with the WWE Championship intersected with his most consistent in-ring period too. 1997 Deadman kinda ruled hard in a way that he'd never done before, and only would again when he was able to assume a lighter schedule during the latter half of his WrestleMania street years. A second go-around with career-best rival Mankind made the best of their wonderfully violent chemistry, while matches against Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart were as magnificent as you'd imagine them to be. The WrestleMania 2 SummerSlam run was the real run when compared to his other stints with the belt. Had a miserable match with the Hulkster when he took it away from him again 11 years later, and his over-the-edge 1999 victory over Stone Cold Steve Austin may as well have not have existed because of, you know, the events that happened earlier in the night. What is of note is his loss to the Rattlesnake when trading the belt back to him a few weeks later on Raw. The closing moments of their match on June 28th drew a 9.5 rating. This is the highest individual segment in the company's 30-plus year history. That man was a draw. Good for business. Number 21, Daniel Bryan. WWE was so stubborn about not crowning Daniel Bryan on the long and winding road to WrestleMania 30 that it actually felt like the cruel few seconds he held it at SummerSlam 2013 were gonna be it for one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. The Yes movement was an immovable object in arenas by then, and the longer audiences were deprived of watching their favourite goat lift the big one, while the louder and more frustrated they became. The company retrospectively swore blind that they were doing all this on purpose just to try and create the ultimate catharsis when he did lift the big one at the show of shows. But as late as Elimination Chamber 1 month prior, this was just bluster and lies, folks. And alas, the crowning moment was where the whole thing peaked too. Bryan got Kane because everybody fricking got Kane at that point, and then he got injured. And then when he retired in 2016, it did genuinely look like that was going to be it. Luckily for all of us, Bryan fought for his dreams, and by 2018 he was all the way back, baby. In a testament to the state that the company was in at that point, WWE had completely mangled the return of Daniel Bryan by winter. But this did set the stage for an inspired heel turn which easily became the greatest run of his entire WWE career. He ended AJ Styles' year-long run with the title via low blow. He had one of the best matches of the year with Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series, and then he created the new Daniel Bryan gimmick, hemp belt and all, heading into a Kofi Mania that will forever bring a tear to this guy's eye. Good stuff. Number 20, Kurt Angle. It's a good job Kurt Angle could wrestle and talk circles around just about every single person he encountered during his first few weeks in WWE, because the one skill he never ever truly mastered at the time was how to swim with the sharks politically. Angle ate dirt over and over again in matches against Triple H, The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin. But his talents were undeniable and he was champion 11 months after debuting all the same. It's ridiculous, it is absolutely ridiculous. His maiden reign peaked at the end with his No Way Out 2001 match against The Rock, ushering in a new style of company main event teased throughout much of the 2000s. When he returned to the Summit in 2001, 2002 and 2003, it was much of the same. On his own steam, Angle wasn't quite the same box office draw as some of his other Attitude Era contemporaries, but there was simply nobody more reliable than Angle at his peak, and each reign fell during a time where he was pretty much untouchable as the best all-rounder in the world. Number 19, Edge. Edge made the WWE Championship an entertaining obsession before finally cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase against John Cena at New Year's Revolution 2006. And he followed all that up by becoming known as the ultimate opportunist in the aftermath. And honestly, when you look back, his first reign did actually draw too. Raw's ratings spiked as audiences earnestly felt that somebody else had broken into the main event picture for the first time since John Cena ascended a year prior. As the pair traded the title throughout the summer, the rated R superstar gimmick began to take shape too. And it also helped Cena re-establish a babyface bond with the audience that at one point looked like it had been lost forever. In the years that followed, Edge became more known for his runs with the World Heavyweight Championship strap rather than fighting over WWE's original and best. But he was still a scene-stealing sports entertainer who built a legacy as somebody who was always in title contention or conversation no matter who he was working with. Number 18, Ultimate Warrior. A generational WWE superstar up to and including the moment he won the WWE Championship. The Ultimate Warrior became the prototype for the company, breaking down a character that fans had forced to the top in an effort to replace Hulk Hogan. To say that was the only reason Warrior's run underperformed would be a bit generous, to be honest. But the changes made to his persona were immediate and undeniable. For better and much worse, he couldn't act or work on top quite like the Hulkster. A break from the cheesiness of Hulkamania was seemingly what the audience had asked for during the rise of the Warrior as the Intercontinental Champion. But Edge's was smoothed far too aggressively when the maniacal star eventually won the strap. A lack of chaotic energy undermined Jim Hellwig's performances, all as the man behind the face paint grew increasingly frustrated and difficult to work with. Colleagues that already had less patience for him as opposed to Hogan had sagging figures and lower payouts to further stir the pot. And just 8 months after Warrior's inevitable crowning at WrestleMania 6, he was losing the belt to Sergeant Slaughter rather than making it to the next show of shows. He was even more of a pain to those above and below him during his 1992 and 1996 returns, with all that resulting in him never getting anywhere near the title again. Number 17, Triple H. Like everything to do with Triple H's career, assessing his WWE Championship legacy is a bit complex. When he was bad, he was horrid.
Do it, spit on that thing, you get me?
The belt was absolutely used to make the man in 1999, no matter what the game himself will tell you. And the best thing about the company's top prize in the early 2000s was that it was on the opposite show to where Triple H was doing his weird sub-Harley race Ric Flair routine. He was actually an underrated stability champion on a surprisingly solid SmackDown in 2008. But many of the plaudits seem premature when a 2009 program with Randy Orton managed to completely kill the WrestleMania 25 main event. In spite of all that though, his 2000 runs with the Gold do actually remain a monument to that brief period there when he really was the best in the world. Business boomed in spite of Stone Cold Steve Austin's injury-led departure, and Triple H was the perfect heel to oppose The Rock and Mick Foley during the Rattlesnake's absence. So perfect, in fact, that fans actually wanted to cheer him, even though opportunities in November 2000 and April 2001 were ultimately squandered in order for Hunter to stay in his comfort zone. Number 16, AJ Styles. Time's arrow neither stands still nor reverses, it just keeps on going forward. For example, AJ Styles could very much end up spending more time in WWE than he did in TNA, despite him once being perceived as the one person who would never turn out for the market leader. I know, it's still a bit weird. It's because of that now dated assessment of the former TNA, NWA and IWGP heavyweight champion that his 2016 WWE Championship win, well, it just really hit different, didn't it? The new trick was to get over the visual of him carrying gold now. He carried it well as a heel over the winter months too, but none of that compared to his second run, oh boy. By defeating Jinder Mahal in 2017, he was cast as a babyface gift from the gods. Not least because the win set up a killer champion versus champion match against Brock Lesnar just a few weeks later. Oddly, for a man who built his reputation on bell to bell, the run didn't really have the matches after that masterclass with Lesnar. But to be honest, none of that really mattered, did it? The damage inflicted on the goal by an ignorantly booked Jinder Mahal reign needed to be cleared up. And the 371-day tenure was exactly what this title needed. Phenomenal work. Number 15, Mankind. The collected lengths of Mankind's WWE Championship reigns really betrayed just how over he was as a top babyface champion in 1998 and 1999, and are more indicative of Vince Russo's booking patterns than the inability of Mick Foley to draw on top. Playing hot potato was normalized in line with the frantic pace of the Attitude Era, and little thought was given to burning through big business moves if they popped a rating every Monday night. Few stories from the time defined that vibe quite as well as that of Mankind and The Rock. From September 1998 to April 1999, the two had 6 pay-per-view matches together and then traded the richest prize in the industry on television twice. Over that period, The Rock turned babyface, then heel, then babyface. Foley's boyhood dream to win the belt came true, and then his WrestleMania main event ones were dashed. And a brutal Royal Rumble match was so appallingly violent that it became the emotional centre of Barry Blaustein's fable Beyond the Mat. All of this informed that beloved rock and sock connection unit that they'd form later that year. What is time? What is it? And Foley snuck in one last run with the gold to transition the gold between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H following SummerSlam. Number 14, CM Punk. CM Punk, much to the annoyance of his fans, and I am one of them, was not a massive needle mover during his massive 434-day run as WWE Champion, nor at too many of the flashpoints during the 2011 Summer of Punk either. It is a significant mark against the voice of the voiceless, it must be said, but it's just about the only one that springs to mind when reflecting on what was, at the time, an unbelievable and remarkable run. It at long last provided Punk with some of the validation he'd always craved. He wanted to be the babyface that closed out the house shows, just as much as he wanted to be the heel who lost it all on WWE's grandest stage, but all too often he was robbed of both. Though the reign lasted longer than anybody's since Hogan's 25 years earlier, he did still lose a lot of those main event spots to John Cena, and infamously found himself out of the WrestleMania conversation completely thanks to the 3-year Rock Cena story. Per his 2023 return, there may actually be another day for Punk and the WWE Championship, but he'll at very least have Money in the Bank 2011 forever. Number 13, Shawn Michaels. As WWE Champion, right as the company was about to glow white hot without him, Shawn Michaels was the man to hand over the gold to Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14. In one of the only times in his WWE career where he'd actually lost the title in the ring. It was a result written in the stars from the moment Michaels controversially reclaimed the title from Bret Hart during the Montreal Screwjob, and then picked up a back injury just 2 months later. Even if wrestling lore has it that The Undertaker needed to tape up his fist menacingly backstage just to ensure that Shawn Michaels did the right thing on the night. He did what was best for business. He'd infamously lost his smile when his second run came to a premature conclusion in 1997. Despite by 2 of his 3 runs being dogged by injuries and politics, he ranks this high on this list thanks to the quality of the first one. Put simply, Michaels absolutely tore it up from bell to bell. He was a machine, he was an animal. Matches against Davey Boy Smith, Jerry Lawler, Vader, Goldust, Steve Austin were stellar at a minimum. Tags with and matches against Sid were an unmitigated success, and his defenses against Diesel and Mankind at In Your House 7 and 10 respectively were just easy match of the year contenders. There were countless stones to throw at Shawn Michaels by the time he eventually achieved his boyhood dream, but none related to just how incredible he was when that bell sounded. Like Bret Hart though, gate receipts didn't really support him being the company's chosen one. But the matches, they easily stood up for themselves. Oh, and speaking of Bret, number 12, Bret Hart. Bret Hart was never a particularly strong domestic draw for WWE, and while it can be argued that he was a figurehead during WWE's darkest financial depths rather than being responsible for the decline, the fact still remains frustratingly in place. But the other way to spin that is to ask this: could anyone other than Bret Hart have been in that position and kept the company afloat? Commitment to the cause of professional wrestling so profoundly fantastic that those that stuck around for the barren years were distracted from noticing how small and empty the venues suddenly were. With eyes glued to the Bret Hart action in the ring, it was easy just not to notice the basketball hoops in the background. So much so that for a generation of fan, there is nobody, not a single person who looks better with that winged eagle strap over his shoulder. Muscled behemoths like Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage wore it well, sure, but none of them held, desired and subsequently elevated it quite like the Hitman. Number 11, Brock Lesnar. With 7 reigns spread across 828 days and across 2 different eras, Brock Lesnar does have the numbers to back up every bit of hyperbole uttered by the likes of Paul Heyman and others. As a wonder kid in 2002 and 2003, he was a force of nature, even if the latter runs as a babyface weren't really in keeping with what he did best. His 2014 mauling of John Cena though was something else. That was something else entirely. A streak-ending Lesnar was then finally re-established as a final boss in the next few years. When he wasn't champion, he was a clear and present danger to whoever was. When he was, it was as though nobody could get anywhere near him. If his final run was the one that was terminated by Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 38, well, it marks a title era going out more like a lamb rather than a lion. But with the beast mired in controversy then, now forever, thanks to the sex trafficking lawsuit against Vince McMahon and WWE, it's perhaps part of the legacy he deserves. Number 10, The Rock.
Take a look.
For many years, it felt as though Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson simply could not be as young as Hollywood suggested. But much of that was just down to how early he cracked and then completed wrestling. The Rock was a seriously bold choice to win the WWE Championship for the first time at Survivor Series 1998, but only because of his youth and his relative inexperience, not his star power. As early as SummerSlam 1998, and that is just less than 2 years into his run, fans were gravitating towards him in a way only comparable to Stone Cold Steve Austin. Bouncing the belt back and forth with Mankind as 1999 dawned was in keeping with the frantic style of the times. But WrestleMania's main event never stood a chance of being anything other than The Rock versus Stone Cold.
Look at this, it's perfect! Chicago is perfect!
Just as it was in 2001 following Rock's exceptional stewardship of the company alongside Triple H in 2000. He was on par with Austin by then, but then surpassed the Rattlesnake as a mainstream crossover star by late 2021. As champion, he was ultimately more of a beneficiary of the business getting hot again, rather than being the one to drive the company back to the promised land in the first place. But it takes a minor miracle to create just one era-defining star in pro wrestling. It took the great one to somehow have 2. Now just have a second. Imagine a world where the final boss is strapped up. Oh boy. Number 9, superstar Billy Graham. Influence is difficult to quantify in all art forms, but superstar Billy Graham's doesn't start and end with his 296 days as WWE champion. A strong run for a heel in the era where long-running babyface champions were the norm. Graham was more than just the man to beat Bruno Sammartino and then just hand the gold over to Bob Backlund. With the gift of the gab to match Dusty Rhodes on his best day, and a body to rival Arnold Schwarzenegger's before the Austrian's biceps had even driven him to total world domination. Graham was a totally different beast in charge of the belt. And it was also a sign of things to come once Vince McMahon Jr. took over his father's territory in years to come. Hulk Hogan's babyface persona borrowed liberally from Superstar's aesthetics and attitude, as did his Hollywood Hogan character a few decades later, to be honest. Jesse the Body Ventura, Scott Steiner, Triple H, Austin Idol and many more either took a little or a lot from Billy, having seen him propelled to the highest of highs as a show-off and audacious heel. Wrestling's never exactly had a fair relationship with royalties, has it? But if it did, Billy Graham would be a damn billionaire. Number 8, Macho Man Randy Savage. When Hulk Hogan won the WWE Championship in 1984, he effectively locked down the remainder of the decade right there, with every new commercial and financial peak seemingly being then surpassed by a new one the North American mainstream had never seen the likes of. So it speaks to just how much of a force of nature the Macho Man was that he was able to take the 1988 to 89 run from WrestleMania 4 to WrestleMania 5, and continue to improve on business by every conceivable metric. From formation to fleshing out and ultimately their explosion, the Mega Powers were absolute box office. But Savage's singles matches performed substantially better than expected, and the contests themselves were supercharged as opposed to the familiar Hogan formula. Promotion and performers sadly could not repeat the trick in 1992 when the business in general was heading for the drain, sadly. But the Macho Man was at very least the most credible option to steer the ship at a rapidly changing time. Number 7. Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund transitioned the WWE Championship between babyfaces Bret Hart and Diesel over just a matter of days in November 1994. Went absolutely mental in the build to become an anti-New Generation heel to do so, and rewrote his own history with a generation of fans in the process. This isn't really the story of Backlund and the top strap though. His 2,135 days between 1978 and 1983, well, they speak for themselves, don't they? With only Bruno Sammartino and Hulk Hogan above him when it comes to longevity and proven ability to maintain the Madison Square Garden audience. The 2-3 match formula of Backlund versus heels worked for Vince McMahon Sr. over and over and over again. Time's not been too kind to Backlund's matches or the character itself though, particularly when viewed in between the ruggedness of Bruno and the bombast of Hogan. But contextually, few can honestly compete with what he accomplished. Number 6. Pedro Morales. Chosen as Vince McMahon Sr.'s next great babyface hope following Bruno Sammartino's shocking loss less than 1 month earlier, Puerto Rican hero Pedro Morales built on his increasing popularity with one hell of a win over despised heel Ivan Koloff. Pedro's youth, well, for that time at least, and an extremely relatable demeanour amongst an ageing population of well-tenured but grizzled veterans, ultimately made him quite a comfortable fit for the role. And with him totaling 1,027 days with the strap, only Bruno, Hulk Hogan, John Cena, Roman Reigns and Bob Backlund can say that they've held that belt for more cumulative days. And only being able to draw justifies such a run back then. Morales had been a revelation for the group dating back to his 1970 debut just a few months before he won the belt. He snared the United States Championship and was then required to vacate it because he'd just gone and won the big one. The rest was history. Number 5. Roman Reigns. Numbers rarely lie in professional wrestling, and some rather big ones back up Roman's near 4-year run with the WWE/Universal Championship strap. The 1,316 days that separate his September 2020 victory over The Fiend and April 2024 loss to Cody Rhodes was some of the most seismic in WWE history. His mere return shook the cobwebs from a truly abysmal pandemic period for the company, with Reigns elevating his own status as a true leader just by walking away when lockdown orders were first issued. At WrestleMania 37 and 38 in 2021 and 2022 respectively, there was nobody coming even close to Mr. Roman Reigns, as evidenced by emphatic wins over Edge, Daniel Bryan and Brock Lesnar. Business was beginning to boom once again for WWE in 2022, and never was that more apparent than during the summer of ratings-gobbling Bloodline segments boasting loads of family drama from Roman Reigns, the Usos and new character Sami Zayn. Millions tuned in, millions more checked it out online. In the meantime, the Tribal Chief perfected his epic main event formula in such a way that every appearance he made and every single match that he had just felt levels above anything else that was going down on television. Well, almost everything, because the longer Cody Rhodes went without winning the WWE Championship, the more he became undeniable.
Paul, what they call what I do? They call this cinema.
But losing did still need to happen all the same. An epic WrestleMania XL finale saw legends and contemporaries combine just to bring down Roman's empire. The company had never, ever been bigger, and one man stood aloft it for the entire duration of the rise. Number 4. John Cena. A contemporary and quite unique entry in that he was never universally loved during any of his 13 WWE Championship reigns. John Cena broke and then reshaped the mold of what it meant to be WWE's top star during the most chaotic creative period of all time. Lots of fans found themselves being alienated by the champ, or at least the version of the company that persisted with him at the top for so damn long. But crucially, this is so very crucial, the younger fans, they adored him. As loud fume enveloped the majority of his matches, children found their first hero and were suddenly bound to all things World Wrestling Entertainment, and pretty much anything that Cena said or did. Having put in almost 15 years of full-time work before gradually phasing himself out into more of a part-time role, generations of fans were bled into wrestling during his peak years, no matter how many older ones were also chased towards alternatives. Cena put his stamp on WWE in a way that almost nobody else on this list was able to. Sure, many of the matches and promos definitely have not aged all that well, but Cena put his stamp on WWE in a way that pretty much nobody else on this list was able to, and for almost as long as an era-defining New York megastar who could not have been more different in style and substance. Number 3, Bruno Sammartino. The WWE Championship, being the recognized symbol of excellence within the pro wrestling industry, stems from the fact that for the longest time, Bruno Sammartino was the bloke holding it. A dignified figure, way too dignified for what pro wrestling would ultimately become. His lengthy tenures with the title secured regular sellouts at Madison Square Garden, back when Vince McMahon Sr. had domain over most of the Northeast. The formula rarely needed to be tweaked when it came to Sammartino. Fans bought into it and believed the struggle, and could even accept him losing via disqualification or countout, just as long as he vanquished his foe in a fairer rematch or steel cage showdown. He kept up his end of the deal, and so too did the customers, with a 2,803-day run being the longest in the belt's history as a result. A 1,237-day run kicked off 10 years after the first one, highlighting his longevity and relationship forged with the fan base through Vince McMahon Sr.'s careful protection of his value. A history maker before such thing even carried any weight. Sammartino's time with the title did as much for Vince McMahon Jr. as it did for his father. By the time the chairman had seized power, he had at his disposal arguably the most prestigious prize at the top of his cards. Number 2, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin was more than just a top babyface or flag bearer for WWE as champion. He was the cultural icon the organization had fumbled around in the dark for throughout the 1990s. Following Hulk Hogan's steep mainstream decline and eventual departure in 1993, wrestling was and is a star's first industry, and though the market leader underwent a number of necessary stylistic and philosophical changes in a post-Hulkamania world, the one thing the brand lacked was a centerpiece that truly extended beyond the pro wrestling bubble. Through force of will of the performer and a remarkable amount of luck and happenstance elsewhere in the industry, the spot was at long last filled by Steve Austin. King of the Ring in 1996, he was a force of nature by 1997, and the uncrowned champion before he even won the belt at WrestleMania 14 in 1998. But do you want to know the dirty secret about the Rattlesnake as a babyface champion?
What?
It's that the reigns were more about the chases to get the gold than the time actually spent with it. His longest stretch with the belt came during that experimental phase as a heel, in a turn that realistically marked the beginning of the end of the company's second boom. And this just proved that being the champion was always as much about the position it represented as much as just wearing the prestigious strap. And that's the bottom line because I said so. Number 1, Hulk Hogan. Carrying a combination of box office and audience popularity in equal measure, Hulk Hogan was the most influential professional North American wrestler during an era so influential that it positioned WWE as the market leader in the industry, well, forever. A dream for the Reagan 80s era, Hogan was a smiling face and jacked physique of an empire on an inexorable rise. And a supremely talented worker on top too. Yeah, I said it. Understanding his assignment with just about every single opponent that he had, Hogan was as incredible at building a heel for nascent pay-per-views and closed circuit shows as he was keeping one hot during a house show title defense. With the glory of his run came immense fame and popularity. WWE were lucky enough to hit upon 2 more Hulk Hogan type figures in the 1990s. But from John Cena to Dave Bautista to even Cody Rhodes, man, there will simply never be another wrestler to penetrate the zeitgeist and then stick around to tell everyone all about it like Hogan did/has.
Yes.
Plenty of ugly real-life moments probably should have chased him away from the spotlight and/or fans' affections, and we could probably fill a whole nother list with them. But it speaks to just how impactful he was that millions the world over have chosen to forgive and forget, brother. Have you enjoyed this mega WWE champion ranking video thing that we just did? Well, if you did, we did a gimmick one as well, so go and click on that, have a good time, I will see you soon, bye bye.